Because we offer this life insurance at these low rates only to people who are in good health. That cuts our risk and your premiums. Then, because this quality term life insurance is sold in amounts of at least $100,000 or more, you get the advantage of volume discounts. And it's easy to do business with Garden State Life Insurance because you deal with us directly. You're always just a phone call away. So call today, 800-257-1257, toll free, 257-1257 for your free personal coverage proposal. No obligation, no pressure. Discover how this quality term life insurance could save you as much as 50% off your premiums every year for the rest of your life. 800-257-1257, toll free. Call Garden State Life Insurance for your free information today, 257-1257.
This is CNN.
From CNN International Correspondents, insights from journalists around the globe on events affecting your world.
After a 14-year civil war and more than 2 million deaths, Afghanistan now stands on the brink. Welcome to International Correspondents. I'm Jamie McIntyre in Washington. For now, the guns have fallen silent in Afghanistan, but the weary rebel warriors may face their greatest challenge yet, putting aside the many ethnic, religious, and territorial differences that stand in the way of forging a lasting peace.
We do not have months, not even days, perhaps. It is essential that no effort is spared to bring that peace, which every Afghan is yearning for. There are enough dead people in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan was the former Soviet Union's Vietnam. 15,000 Soviet soldiers died in the decade-long effort to prop up a pro-communist government there. And although the Soviets withdrew in 1989, their proxy president, Najibullah, held on to power until last week, when he was forced to step down. The United States heavily armed Mujahideen rebels in the 80s, and now the stockpiles of U.S. and Soviet arms are a destabilizing force.
We are very encouraged that the factions are continuing to talk. We are very encouraged that everyone so far to date has acted responsibly. They have not taken arms into their hands and gone and just blatantly killed people.
A positive development this week was the reported agreement on a 51-member interim coalition council representing 10 major Muslim guerrilla groups to rule until elections can be held. That would seem to diffuse a conflict between two of the most powerful rebel leaders, Ahmad Shah Massoud, a perceived moderate whose forces are said to virtually control Kabul, and Islamic hardliner Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, Massoud's bitter anti-Western rival who had threatened to storm Kabul if power were not handed over to him. But the line between alliance and anarchy remains very thin. And while there are some indications long-divided rebels are willing to put past differences behind them, no one predicts a quick resolution to the crisis facing this war-ravaged country that was one of the last battlegrounds in the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. We'll call on our panel of international correspondents to bring the week's and the decade's events into perspective. Joining me are Alexander Ivanko of the Russian-American newspaper We, Nayyar Zaidi of the Pakistani newspaper the Daily Jang, and Seema Sirohi of the Indian newspaper the Telegraph. Nayyar, let me ask you to begin with. The question, of course, is can the Afghan rebels convert the war against Najibullah into a positive peace force now?
The answer is no, not at least in the near future. And also, if you see the trend worldwide is countries falling apart, struggling disintegration. Even the countries like India or Yugoslavia, which had a tradition of a stable political government, are falling, are either struggling against disintegration or falling apart. So in Afghanistan, I don't expect that people who had taken up arms for 13 years are just going to be buddies overnight. So there is going to be considerable instability.
Alexander, how about you? Do you see them pulling this together?
I agree with my colleague from Pakistan. I don't think there's any way that Massoud and Hekmatyar can stick together in one council. On one part, you have a moderate Muslim, and on the other part, who's, by the way, Tajik, On the other part, you have a hardline fundamentalist Muslim who is a Pushtun and comes from the dominant tribe in Afghanistan.
Seema, your analysis, can the Afghan rebels put aside their past differences?
It depends. I mean, I know the worldwide trend is towards ethnic separatism and more expression of individual nationalities, but if the international will and the international coalition, let's say, puts its weight behind this peace effort, I think there is still a chance that we can avoid the kind of division of Afghanistan along ethnic lines that everybody seems to be fearing. Because Masood is a good influence, I think, in this council. He's a moderate, as my colleague said. So it all depends, I would say.
Well, now, what about this proposal now, this compromise that's been agreed to by at least some of the political leaders of the rebels for a 51-member interim council that would rule on an interim basis? What kind of chances do you give that for success?
I think that this is just a peaceful and political way for all factions to enter Kabul without bloodshed. Once they are in place, and if you look at the structure of the council, Rabbani, who is the head of the party to which Masood belongs, is the head of the council, which is the equivalent of Speaker of the Parliament to me, I believe. Head of the government will be Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, and that is where the executive branch is. I feel that once they are into Kabul, the intrigues will start, and they still have their arms, and there will be struggle to eliminate one or the other. Now, what shape will it take, we don't know. But I want to make one point. Now, we keep hearing about this Ahmad Shah Massoud being moderate and so being fundamentalist. Anybody who shoots and kills, in my opinion, is not a moderate. So what we are talking about is he is pro-American, and Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, of course, is independent and is not towing the American line, and that's where, you know, the Americans start calling moderate.
Ivanko, do you ever see those two getting together?
I have to disagree. I don't think that we can call Masood a cold-blooded killer in any way, and I think that he is a true moderate because his program and the program he established in the cities that were under his control was some form of civilized government rule, which you don't see in cities captured by Hikmatyar's people. So I think that Masood is a good influence in this council, but the only problem is he's the only good influence in this council.
Well, he doesn't seem to be playing much of a role in the initial, I think his title in this council would be defense minister or something.
Right. I mean, it all has to evolve. The council was just announced today. I think we have to see how this balance of power really works out. But Hikmatyar was supported by the Americans for almost 13 years. So it's not so much a question of what the Americans call Hikmatyar, moderate.
Let me correct you. Americans were supporting all factions as long as they were fighting the Russians. As soon as it became clear in 1986 that Russians were going to eventually withdraw, the Americans shifted their support, because then the American influence was to subvert the Mujahideen, create disunity, sponsor a Mujahideen leader, which they were looking for, and they adopted Ahmad Shah Massoud. So, I mean, as far as there was a common enemy, there was support. And Hikmatyar was supported because he had the best fighters. Actually, Hikmatyar is the one who defeated the Russians, not Ahmad Shah Massoud. So,
yeah, but
this is what everybody says.
Masood's people mostly defeated the Russians in the north, and Hikmatyar received 70% of all U.S. support, while Masood almost didn't receive any support from the U.S.
Do you know he was running a toll road, taking money from Russians to keep Najibullah supplied for all the last 2-3 years? Russian supplies could not have gotten to Najibullah if it was not for Mr. Ahmad Shah Massoud providing the access.
Because he's the most intelligent.
You said you disagree, and we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to let you disagree. Stay with us.
Recently, the International Motorsports Association held a decathlon of performance and control. Over 22 days, 7 cars competed in 10 events to determine which was best overall. It wasn't Acura or Volvo, nor Mercedes or Mazda, nor Lexus or BMW, but the Audi 100 V6, the IMSA Decathlon Gold Medal winner.
and Gardens Real Estate goes to work on an open house, expect it to be closed. Don't miss your new home. Visit a Better Homes and Gardens open house this weekend.
Notice, sensitive viewers may be disturbed by the following filth. This isn't industrial pollution or municipal wastewater. It's what's left in your carpet after vacuuming. But this filth you can get rid of. Take the Bissell Challenge. Vacuum like always, then deep clean with a powerful, easy-to-use Bissell deep cleaning machine. In mere moments, you'll reach the deep down dirt and grime vacuums can't touch. Get results like this, or your money back. You have nothing to lose but filth.
When the U.S. swim team needs eardrops, there's no competition. Murine eardrops for wax removal. Murine, the official eardrops of the U.S. swim team.
Welcome back to International Correspondents. We're discussing the future of Afghanistan with Alexander Ivanko of the Russian-American newspaper We, Nayyar Zaidi of the Pakistani newspaper, the Daily Jang, and Seema Sirohi of the Indian newspaper, the Telegraph. And when we take a break, Seema, you were about to make a point of disagreement, so please.
I was just going to say, in the relative scheme of things, I do believe that Masood is a moderate influence, and for 13 years, Hekmatyar was the beneficiary of not only U.S. largesse, but also Pakistani largesse. The Pakistani intelligence agencies that were controlling the flow of arms and money to the Mujahideen rebels had Hekmatyar as their favorite, and they supported him for quite a while. And under their aegis, he was raising a rebel army. Even today, he is believed to be doing that.
Nayyar, how is this story playing in your paper in Pakistan?
Oh, it's playing very prominently. I mean, Afghanistan is a lead story in Pakistan because we were in the front line, and Pakistan suffered the greatest losses, both financial and in terms of life. So it is a lead story, and everybody has a very keen interest in seeing a positive outcome, although, you know, people are not hopeful.
Alexander, how in your paper?
It's the top of page 1 because this is a story that's very important for Russians. More than 1 million Russians served in the military in Afghanistan, and I watched the Russian news program today before coming here, and it's also a top story on the TV news program.
Now, your Russian-American newspaper is quite different from the paper. You were with Izvestia.
Izvestia, yes.
In Kabul.
Yes, I was the bureau chief of Izvestia in 1989.
So I imagine the press coverage is completely different now.
Yes, it's completely different. Back in 1989, it was very hard to publish the true story of what was happening in Afghanistan, especially with these Scud missiles that were arriving in Afghanistan and the cities that have been bombed with the help of Russian advisors at that time. This story did not get into the press until 1990, 1991.
What kind of, Seema, editorial slant are we seeing on the story in India?
There's a lot of fear in India about destabilization in Afghanistan, and also, as you know, Najibullah is trying to come to India under the protection of the United Nations. So that's of interest to the Indian readers. His wife and his children are already in New Delhi, I believe, and the UN authorities have given him the assurance that they will provide him safe passage. It is on page 1, as expected, though the Indian government, I think, now realizes that its initial stand of not being critical of the Soviet invasion was perhaps not as wise, and is trying to open channels towards the rebels.
Nayyar, is the interest of Pakistan a lot different from, say, the interest of India in how things go in Afghanistan?
Well, traditionally, the interest of Pakistan is always different than the interest of India. But Indians had a large Hindu population in Afghanistan all along, which controlled the economics and trade. So they have that interest that if a really hardcore Islamic government takes place, that's why they keep supporting the moderates. These people may have to, some of them have already fled, but most of them may have to go to India. Pakistan has an interest because they have had a very hostile Afghanistan for the last 40 years under the Soviet support and the Indian support. So they have fought this bitter war, and they think that they are entitled to have a friendly or at least a truly neutral government in Afghanistan, so they don't have to wash their backyard all the time.
But, Alexander, isn't the fear that that government that may tilt more toward Pakistan is going to be more of a threat to the former Soviet Union, particularly the republics that border?
I don't think it's going to be more of a threat to these republics if it's a pro-Pakistani government. My only concern is that it will be a neutral government, and the government which will have the support of the world community, which I'm not so sure will happen if Hekmatyar's group have any large say in this government.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add that if the Soviet Union was intact as one entity, then perhaps a pro-Pakistan or pro-Islam government would have been a threat to them, but they're already disintegrated, you know. The threat was that the Muslim or Islamic influence will spread to the Central Asian republics and break them up. That has already happened. So I don't think that...
But we need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the legacy of the Soviet and U.S. intervention in Afghanistan. Stay with us.
I was already late for my meeting when my flight landed. Lucky for me, someone left a courtesy car. I had to get to Dollar Rent-A-Car fast. Sure, I would have loved to stop for a cup of coffee, a donut, a Limburger cheese taco, and fries, but there was no time. Besides, my expense account was about as tight as spandex on a beauty queen. Yep, Dollar Rent-A-Car was the obvious choice. They are right on the airport with low rates.
Welcome to Dollar. How was your flight?
Not bad. One more flip, I would have nailed a triple. Anyway, I'm in a hurry right now. I need a rental car I can afford.
No problem.
Please report runaway courtesy cars to the main office.
Call your travel consultant or Dollar at 1-800-800-4000.
In the war against termites, nobody packs more power than the exterminator, the Orkin Man. And now his newest weapon makes him more powerful than ever. The exclusive Orkin Foam system. Orkin Foam reaches vulnerable areas more effectively than other methods. It penetrates more completely to stop termites cold. Guaranteed. And only the exterminator has it. The Orkin Man. One call destroys them all.
Have you ever created or invented a product? Don't just let it sit there. Do something about it. You can start by calling the Inventors Helpline in Washington, D.C. at 800-227-7000. You'll receive free confidential forms and useful information describing the invention process. And when you call right now, you'll also receive a free brochure which tells you how to begin to develop your new idea. So get the ball rolling. Pick up your phone right now and call for your free Inventor's Kit.
Call 800-227-7000.
Welcome back to International Correspondents. Alexander, Ivanko, given the former Soviet Union's past involvement in Afghanistan, can Russia and the other republics have any influence on what goes on there now?
Yes, definitely, especially the Central Asian republics. Uzbekistan and Tajikistan can have a lot of influence in that region, first of all, because of a lot of Tajiks, Masood and Rabbani being two of them, are Tajiks also in Afghanistan. And I think that some of the CIS republics and Russia can have sufficient influence. But the whole problem is that the United States and Russia should support Rabbani and Masood and not divide their support between different groups.
Nayyar, you mentioned the fact that the United States sort of lost interest in Afghanistan after the fall of the Soviet Union and the sort of end of the Cold War. Is there a role for the United States to play now?
Well, first, I didn't mean that they lost interest. I think that their interest shifted. They were supporting the ouster of Soviet troops. After the Soviets left, their biggest concern was to make sure that Gulbuddin or the so-called Islamic fundamentalist forces should not take over. And that's why they sponsored Masood. But my point is that Masood, who is a Tajik, represents an ethnic minority in Afghanistan. I mean, if you support Masood, you are asking for civil war because Pashtuns are in majority, regardless of whether moderate or pro-Islamic or not. There is a definite ethnic rivalry between Pashtuns and Tajiks. And
analysts, I think there is a lot of disagreement about the ethnic composition of Afghanistan, especially after the war. And
there never has been a good census taken,
right,
has there?
and the Pashtuns are not in absolute majority all over the country.
Well, are they in a simple majority?
They are in a certain area. They are
They're mostly in the south. The north is mostly Tajik.
Well, then you are advocating a partition of Afghanistan.
No,
I think overall, in the country, Pashtuns are in majority, and Tajiks, if all the minorities were put together, then maybe they will become equal to Pashtuns. But you see, I went to school in Peshawar. I have lived there. I was brought up there, and we always had this issue. So Pashtuns are, all these experts come and start saying this or that. I mean, but I think that Pashtuns are in majority, and they are not going to accept a Tajik as a ruler, period. You are asking for civil war.
Okay, but the Pashtuns are also very much divided between themselves.
Well, so is the Republican Party, and so is the Democratic Party, and Ross Perot is running here.
But we're talking about violent rivalries between some of the Pashtun groups. For example, groups close to the Homeland Party.
In Afghanistan and in the Pashtun part of Pakistan, they settle all disputes peacefully with a gun.
Peacefully, yes, that's the only answer.
This debate comes exactly to the point of whether Afghanistan will survive intact, and we'll ask you to make some predictions about that when we come back. Stay with us for more of International Correspondents.
We've seen some incredible changes take place in the last couple years. Changes that will affect our families, our jobs, even our whole planet. In fact, the prospects for a better world are as good today as they've ever been. Strength and resolve have kept us free during the most troubling moments of this century and can keep us free into the next. And in this uncertain world, it's important to remember the real peace dividend is peace.
Some people don't enjoy their pools enough.
It's too much work.
It's easy to keep our pool sparkling and ready to enjoy with BioGuard.
It's too expensive.
The BioGuard 3-step program saves money. We work less, spend less, and enjoy our pool more. Relax. Bring your pool to BioGuard.
I'm relaxed. You relaxed?
Put more than one person in the average New York City hotel room, and before long, they're bouncing off the walls. But at Embassy Suites, you get a spacious 2-room suite, 2 remote TVs, a microwave, 3 phones, complimentary breakfast, and much more, all for the price of an ordinary hotel room. Twice the comfort and twice the value. Embassy Suites, New York. It's twice the hotel, even if we only have one door.
Welcome back to International Correspondents. It's prediction time. And Seema, let me ask you first, what is your best guess of what will happen next? What kind of government will emerge in Afghanistan?
It will be some sort of a coalition, and I think there is still some time to save the situation if the U.S. puts its weight behind the UN effort, because I think it costs much less to make peace than to make war, especially over 12, 13 years. And the United States has sort of been observing a hands-off policy ever since this whole situation developed and President Najibullah resigned. And I know it's election time in the U.S., but even then, when there is a fear of destabilization in that region, I think the kind of effort the U.S. put in the Gulf for is needed.
Alexander?
I don't think that this interim government will last very long. It's too fragile to last for so many months as they predict. And also, we must remember that until the two main factions, the Jamiat-e-Islami and Hezb-e-Islami, get together and find a solution to their common problems, I don't think there's any possibility of one government being in charge in Afghanistan.
Nayyar, are you optimistic or pessimistic at this point?
I have to... Well, I'm kind of in between, but I have to see if they go up to the point of elections, which all parties have agreed, and what kind of election results. And I think that's where the United Nations and both U.S. can play a constructive role if they can guarantee free and fair elections. And let whichever segment prevails take control instead of supporting Massoud or somebody else.
How fragile a situation is this? We've heard it described as a powder keg.
It is very fragile. It could break up by the time we go on air.
Could we have all-out anarchy and civil war?
Yes, definitely we can have that, because you have to remember that a whole generation has been brought up only seeing war, and guns have a tendency of shooting even if you are not planning on pulling the trigger.
Do you agree the danger is there?
The danger is there, and if the U.S. is serious about retrieving some of the dangerous weapons it supplied the Mujahideen, I think we could at least get back some of the Stinger missiles and things like that, although it's very unlikely that the rebel leaders would simply hand them over. So there is some talk of buying them back.
Quick prediction, what will happen to Najibullah, who's now apparently holed up in a UN office?
The best scenario is that he'll make it to Delhi for a temporary asylum in India and then go on to, hopefully, to some other country.
My question is, why should he get an asylum? Hitler didn't get asylum, Nazis are still not getting asylum, and Noriega didn't get an asylum. So why should Najibullah get an asylum?
And I would agree with my Pakistani colleague. He shouldn't get any asylum.
He should be tried, and whatever...
Tried, and the Afghan government, the Afghan people have to decide what to do with Najibullah.
Now, by all accounts,
well, Libyan people are not deciding what to do with those two terrorists, so I think there is a chance for being extradited to Pakistan or some other place, I think.
So you think he should be put on trial?
But in the context of the UN plan, his resignation was part of the deal to facilitate the political process. So I don't think we can just sort of throw up our hands and say he should go back and be tried. I think the whole process can unravel.
The problem is, did the people who want to try him sign the, were part of that deal? If they were, then of course the hands are tied. But otherwise, I think a criminal like Najibullah should be tried. He should simply not get asylum and reunite with his family. I mean,
yes, definitely.
I'm not advocating in hanging, but I'm saying there should be some punishment.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate you being here, and I want to thank you for joining us for another edition of International Correspondents. We'll be back again next week. I'm Jamie McIntyre in Washington. From the CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Dave Michaels. Ahead on CNN Weekend Sports Late Night, Ron Hyde is here to give us a preview. Ron.
Well, we have a full menu from the world of sports on Saturday. The NBA playoffs, a couple of teams already on the brink of elimination. Stanley Cup playoffs, the Stanley Cup champs hanging on for dear life. In baseball, plenty of that. So join Dan Hicks and me in just a couple of minutes on CNN Sports Late Night.
Thanks, Ron. Now here's an update on our top story, the Northern California earthquake. Reports say 45 to 53 people have been injured, though none seriously. There are no reported deaths. Saturday's quake measured 6.9 on the Richter scale as it rocked Humboldt County north of San Francisco. The town of Ferndale was hard hit. Residents were gathered along Ferndale's Victorian Main Street for an Old West festival when the ground shook. A local cable company captured the scene on videotape. Humboldt County has been declared a disaster area by the governor. In the town of Petrolia, fire destroyed the post office. Several other towns in the county also suffered broken glass, gas leaks, power outages, and scattered fires. Damage is estimated at $3.5 million so far. Stay with us on CNN. Sports Late Night is coming up next.
Now you needn't go to the symphony to hear the classics, when you can own the collector's library of best-loved classics. This stupendous collection features every important category of classical music ever written. Best-loved overtures, best-loved symphonies, best-loved concertos, and best-loved dances. Plus, you'll get best love ballets and best love piano music. The Collector's Library of Best Love Classics is just $19.95. To order, call this toll-free number now.
This is CNN.
CNN Sports is another night on the NBA playoff hardwoods where Hardaway made it look easy against the Sonics. Duck is proving his worth against the Lakers. Could the Cavs prove their net worth against New Jersey? Could the Celtics bag the Pacers again at the Garden? Pivotal Game 4s in the NHL. Mario tried to keep the Pens off thin ice. Steve Avery was in search of his first win against first-place Houston. Jose talked a good game against the Twins. If you can get a glove on it, stay with it. For CNN Sports.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to CNN Sports Late Night. I'm Ron Hyde.
And I'm Dan Hicks. Thanks for staying up with us tonight. We begin with the NBA playoffs, Ron, and this was a game that Golden State had to have, and they ended up beating the Sonics at their own game, really.
That's right, Dan. You know, they needed Michael Buffer in the corner, you know, say, let's get ready to rumble. That's the kind of series it's been so far. You know, the Seattle Golden State Western Conference playoff series is a contrast in styles. The big physical Sonics against the swifter, smaller Warriors. But if any similarities earmark this rivalry, it has to be the ill will that exists when these combatants meet. These encounters are very, very physical. But Saturday in Oakland, the Warriors were looking for something more. They were looking for the W to even the best-of-5 series at a game apiece. Here's Don Nelson instructing rookie Chris Gatlin to get it going, but it was Seattle who had it going early. Nate McMillan and Ricky Pearson swinged it to Sean Kemp for the jam. 39-32 Sonics at this point. And things got a little rough. You want physical? Check out Alton Lister and Sean Kemp, even little Timmy Hardaway in the middle of this fracas. Third quarter, though, Chris Mullet will do it for Golden State. He has the